Hello, this is your pal Pally, and welcome to the Power Word Drunk's Guide to the Will of the Emperor's encounter in Mogashan Vaults. This encounter consists of controlling a bunch of adds on top of killing two bosses with a shared health pool. 2 tanks, a mix of ranged and melee DPS, and 5 to 6 healers is what is required for this fight. The fight is fairly long and will likely end at around 10 to 12 minutes. There is a soft and rage mechanic that will probably kill most raid groups around the 12.5 minute mark. First up, the adds. There are 3 types of adds: Emperor's Rage, Emperor's Strength, and Emperor's Courage. The simplest to deal with is the Emperor's Rage. 4 of them will pop out at a time. They have no aggro table and will fixate on a random raid member. They can be slowed and CC'd by everything in your arsenal. Emperor's Strength is a large add with a big hammer. 2 of them come out at a time, and they have a normal aggro table, but they do not melee their current target. Instead, they will rear back and smash the ground, stunning anyone within the white circle where it impacts. Every time they do this, the area where they'll hit next will grow larger. You are not able to CC or slow the strengths. Lastly, 2 courages will spawn from opposite ends of the room. They will pick a tank, fixate on that tank, and run across the room towards them. If a courage reaches a tank, it will cast Impeding Thrust. Impeding Thrust will slow your tank's movement speed by 25% for each successful strike, and it stacks. These adds are slowable, but not stunnable. We'll get back to how to deal with each of these adds when we talk about the strategy. After about a minute and a half of dealing with adds, the bosses will come out. Tanks need to be ready to pick them up immediately and move them away from the raid. Their normal melee hits for a ton, so healers will always need to watch tanks. The unique part of these bosses is that they'll do a devastating combo every 30 seconds or so. This is the other key mechanic to the fight that requires you to do some serious dancing. As anyone in his melee range, you have to successfully dodge a series of 5 random strikes that the boss will do. If you are successful, you will get an extra action button that will hit the boss with an opportunistic strike for 500k damage. If you fail to dodge a strike, you will take some moderate physical damage and gain a stacking debuff, reducing your armor by 10%. If you are a tank in this encounter, get used to this part of the fight. It's your baby. Adds will continue to spawn until the second phase of the encounter, when Titan's Gas is released into the room. Titan's Gas will last for 30 seconds, and then the encounter will go back to phase 1. The gas hits the raid for some light frost damage, but also increases the melee damage done by everything in the room. That includes players, adds, and the bosses. This means 2 things. You will be able to burn the bosses and any remaining adds down quickly, so DPS cooldowns are best saved for this phase. But also realize that the tanks will be taking increased melee damage from bosses that already hit pretty hard. Watch your tank's health very closely and rotate through raid CDs as much as necessary. After Titan's Gas is over, adds will start to spawn again and you repeat phase 1. Titan's Gas will come out 4 times in the encounter. The 4th one is the soft and rage mechanic, as it will never go away and adds will continue to spawn throughout that phase. Kill the boss quickly or be overwhelmed by the damage and the adds. That explains the major mechanics of the fight, so let's talk strategy. Positioning wise, your heals and ranged will generally be in the dead center of the room. Tanks will have the bosses towards the front of the room near the staircases. Depending on how many melee you bring, most will be on the boss full time with the tanks, but some may be assisting the ranged with adds. We've designated 2 other positions on the sides of the room with raid markers where we wanted the strengths to be tanked. This can be wherever you want in the room. The important part is that the strength shouldn't be allowed to smash the raid or tanks with that big bad hammer. Dealing with the adds in the fight can basically be described as a kill priority. Kill courages over strengths, kill strengths over rages. Courages will disable your tank's ability to dodge the combos, so they have to go down as soon as possible. After that, strengths can get out of hand if they stay up too long. The area they smash will get really large. If strengths get out of hand, you can assign a melee to each side to pick up the strengths and tank them while the raid handles the other priorities. Rages are a nuisance for the most part, and if you have a higher priority target out there, definitely make use of slows, kiting, and CCs to keep them under control. Dealing with rages sounds simple, but there are usually 4 of them running around chasing people. It isn't too bad in normal mode for someone to get hit by one, but if the Titan's gas comes up, DPS or heals can get slaughtered by an uncontrolled rage. Make liberal use of slows at the very least, hunter's traps, roots, totems, whatever you have available. If a new set of rages comes out and you are supposed to be dealing with a higher priority add, picking off a few rages to CC is not a bad idea. Lastly, the courages are definitely top priority, but remember to apply a slow to each side. Also note that the courages can only be DPS'd from behind, so the raid will have to move in order to kill these. Try to evenly split your DPS so that neither side gets even close to a tank. Speaking of split DPS, you will have to designate some melee that will be on the bosses full time after they spawn. At current normal mode gear levels, it is likely impossible to just have the tanks do the dance and hope to beat the enrage. With that in mind, we had 4 melee assigned to be on the bosses to dance and use opportunistic strikes as much as possible. Each one of them in this kill was able to dance successfully between 12 and 16 times. At 500k a pop, that is what really downs the bosses here. If adds are easily under control in terms of your other DPS, you can begin to add more melee to the bosses, but 2 tanks plus 3 to 4 melee should get the job done in general. Healing wise, you will definitely need to designate at least 1 healer per tank due to the massive amount of melee damage the bosses do. Plus, the way the tanks need to be spaced apart, you may have range problems if you, as a healer, are trying to heal a raid plus a tank. Titan's Gas is obviously the stress point for healing in this fight. You'll have 2 minutes or so before the next Titan's Gas, so plan your raid CDs accordingly. Also, tanks will be taking a ton of regular melee damage during Titan's Gas, so if you need to use external CDs on tanks, this is the time for it. Tanks, I'll talk about dancing in a moment, but basically your job is to succeed at dancing and help the healers out when the boss is not slashing. Keep the bosses in the same position so as to not outrange your healers and blow major CDs during each of the Titan's Gas phases. Those that are assigned to dance with a boss will need to get some practice in. I suggest going to LFR and doing this boss until it feels natural. What we found in downing this boss was that it wasn't one particular strategy for dodging that made it click for everyone. People will have to find something that works for them. There are quite a few cues that the bosses give. If you watch his stance, you can see which way he is going to slash. The blue flashing lines are another obvious cue. As well, boss mods will give an indication of arc left or arc right to tell you where it is going. One thing people will struggle with initially is the stomp. He will throw a stomp in there in most combos. If you don't notice it quick enough, you get stunned, which likely leads to you getting hit with the next slash. The stomp is indicated by a faint cloud on the ground, and of course, the absence of the blue slash lines. The boss will also lift up his foot, so if you're watching the stance, that can be your cue. Regardless, get out as soon as you can. Also on the stomp, you need to try to not run a large distance away from it. His next slash after the stomp could clip you as you run back into melee range. Tanks, this is especially true for you as he puts a debuff on you at the pull that sucks you back into his melee range if you get more than 15 yards away. The stomp is a 10-yard range, so you have to find that sweet spot in the 10 to 15 range. 2 more notes on the devastating combo dance. If you are successful in dodging them all, you get that extra action button. Be sure to click it quickly. It goes away if you don't use it within about 3 seconds. And lastly, take a look at your current talent choices to find any that might assist you in dodging these combos. As a Pally, I went with Pursuit of Justice so that I'd be fairly nimble throughout the majority of the fight. Other classes should have some choices that will make this easier to do, and at the very least, make sure you have some sort of boot run speed enchant. To summarize, the fight consists of controlling ads and dodging some big-ass slashes. Accomplish that and collect the loot. I hope this guide was helpful, and please leave comments below as well as liking the video if you did indeed like it. Thanks, and see you next time.